I'm Debbie Braun with the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, and you are watching this edition of Aspen Affairs. We're taking Aspen Affairs on the road today. I'm here coming to you from the Aspen Institute campus, where we're hosting our Business Outlook Forum. We've got a great lineup of speakers today. We're going to have a lot of fun and hopefully learn about what's going on in the economy. So hope you enjoy the program. I'll be with you afterwards and we will catch up. Thanks. Good morning, Aspen Chamber Resort Association members. It's really great to see so many familiar faces here today at our Business Outlook Forum. I'm Debbie Braun, president of the Aspen Chamber. As we kick off the forum today, I wanted to remind us all of the importance of keeping a sense of humor in the ever-changing landscape of the economy. After all, they say that economists have predicted 9 out of the last 5 recessions. But seriously, it's crucial for us to stay informed and adaptable as we navigate the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. As members of the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, you're part of the largest business coalition in the Valley with a whopping 750 members. That's quite an impressive group. And by the way, at least half of you are out today trying to get your 100-day PIN by Sunday. So I'm wishing that group the best of luck. We're proud to organize as a 501c6 business league, which is business, not a charity, which means you can write off your membership dues as a business expense. ACRA is positioned to take service contracts with local municipalities and improve the destination experience for visitors and locals alike. With a strong membership comes a wealth of benefits and opportunities, from discounted ski passes to marketing and advertising support, networking, and public affairs, to name a few. ACRA oversees the destination management funds, and last year we released a destination management plan with input from over 2,000 locals, and none of that input was the same. So we did a lot of digesting, and we finally came up with a management plan that we think will sustain us into the future. We produce special events like the Food and Wine Classic and Winter School, and we also provide business referrals directly from our visitor centers, and we see about 100,000 people per year. We are here to create an environment for Aspen to thrive, and with your dedication and hard work, we know that we can achieve that vision. As we look ahead to the future, it's important to keep in mind the ever-changing landscape of the business world. Our economy is constantly evolving, and it's really up to us to stay informed and adapt to the new trends and the technologies. I'd like to thank Atlantic Aviation for sponsoring our Business Outlook Forum today. I'd like to recognize the ACRA board members and the staff. Can you guys please stand up? And a round of applause. This doesn't happen magically. All of these people are working hard. So let's stay focused, let's stay motivated, and most importantly, let's stay positive. So now I'd like to introduce our Member Services Manager, Savannah Grant, who's going to read our land acknowledgement. Savannah?
All right, welcome. Today we are gathered on the ancestral territory of the Uncompahgre tribe of the Ute Nation, or Nucha. We honor the inherent stewardship Native people have for the land, waters, and air in which our residents and visitors continue to have the privilege to revel in. We strive to learn from the Ute tradition of living in harmony with the environment and take action to sustain it for generations to come. To take this acknowledgement a step further, ACRA will be making a donation to the Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers on behalf of every attendee here today to support stewardship of our lands and encourage volunteerism to protect our natural resources. I'll now welcome to the stage Senior Director of Business Development, Sarah Reynolds-Lasser, to introduce our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm noticing a theme between Debbie, Savannah, and myself. It looks like we're mourning spring or lack thereof, so we've got some of our neutral colors going. So hopefully we'll have some spring-like weather here in the near future. Thank you all for joining us today. We will be sharing insights into our state economy, regional workforce, affordable housing, and real estate markets. Along with presenting this information to you, we want to hear from you. Throughout the morning, we will have live polling for you all to provide feedback. ACRA has been focusing on the culture of our organization since 2018. Through this work, we have learned how to better support and flex towards our staff members' styles. We check in on our staff and celebrate our achievements and milestones. ACRA has created team agreements which guide our work and interactions both internally and externally. I encourage you all to reflect on your own culture within your business and use it as a tool to attract and retain staff. Before we jump into our presentations, let's do a check-in. How are you feeling this morning? Has anyone seen the blob tree before? Let's do a check-in and see how everyone's doing. Maybe you're a little tired. It's early. Clearly, Old Man Winter's not done with us yet. Go ahead and scan the QR code on your table, and this will bring you to a little poll. We want to hear how everyone's doing. This is a check-in that we do with our own staff during our staff meetings, just to see how folks are doing. And we want to take this time to check in. How are we doing this spring morning? Go ahead and scan that QR code, and let's see what those blobs are looking like for you all today. Okay, I like the enthusiasm so far. All right, about 10 more seconds. Last time to get your blob on the screen. All right, it's looking good. Receptive, open to conversation, we like that. Oh, I am making some assumptions. Good point, Peggy. So you can open the camera on your phone to scan that QR code. And you can grab me after, and I'm happy to talk about QR codes and all the wonderful things they can do for your marketing. So that's great. All right, thanks so much for that feedback. We have 5 great presenters for you this morning. Please hold your questions until after all the presentations, and we will bring the full panel back up for an audience Q&A. We are delighted to welcome Greg Sobetski, Chief Economist for Colorado's Legislative Council staff, the nonpartisan research staff of the Colorado General Assembly. He leads a team who forecasts Colorado's economy and tax revenue, supporting members of the General Assembly to maintain a balanced state budget. Since joining the Legislative Council staff in 2013, Greg has developed a reputation as an expert in income and property taxes, transportation finance, and the Tabor Amendment. We have all seen Greg's work in our mailboxes in the nonpartisan Blue Book Voter Guide. Please join me in welcoming Greg Sobetski.
Well, it's an absolute joy to be with you all here this morning. I'm going to move the mic up. There we go. It's an absolute joy to be with you all here this morning. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to present our outlook for the state economy. As you can see on the slide, this is our March economic outlook. We produce an outlook quarterly. This is the March version. It's also the most important forecast of the year. It's the one that our legislature used to set the budget for the coming fiscal year that begins here on July 1st. What I'd like to do this morning is talk through both our expectations for the macroeconomy, what we expect in terms of the economic outlook over the course of the next 3 years, and then dig into a few elements that I think are going to be of most value to you all this morning, specifically the labor market, expectations for monetary policy and interest rates, and then finally some discussion of housing. So, when I gave presentations like this last summer, audiences that I encountered assured me that we were in fact in a recession over the course of July, August, September of 2022. That was the overwhelming expectation I heard, and especially from business community audiences like yours. The expectation was, look, we have runaway inflation. We're at a point when the economy clearly can't keep up with the demand that's coming from prices or the demands that are being put on business and on households that are coming from prices. And we've seen, at that point, 2 quarters of actual real declines in total economic output in GDP. That didn't happen, or at least the experts at the National Bureau of Economic Research's, they call it this, the Recession Dating Committee, which to me sounds like when we're planning reality TV for during the recession. But the Recession Dating Committee says we didn't experience a recession in 2022, and I agree with them, right? If you look back at what the history of recessions look like in the United States, in 2008 and 2009, we had 2 years when economic output was below its level from before the recession, and 5 years before we got back up to trend. COVID was unusual. The recession was much deeper, you can see that on the chart, and the recovery was much faster. We're well over where we were before the recession in terms of total economic output. We're also above the trend level that we were at heading into that recession. So, you hear a lot of talk about recession. Recession is a condition in the economy where demand is falling and the total economy is incentivized to produce less and less output over time. I'm going to talk about recession risk today. But before I do, I want to spend more time talking about, I think, the sickness that's in our economy today, which isn't recession, it's overheating. We're in an environment where the economy has demand for more than our businesses, our economic infrastructure can produce right now. The result of that is prices that are through the roof for many commodities, and it's a business environment where the appetite to produce more exists, but there are real constraints in the ability of our economy to actually effectuate the steps needed to produce more output. Specifically, in 2022, we saw supply chain constraints in terms of actual shipments of products into the United States, particularly energy. And then we're seeing now, and something that I want to focus on this morning, is real labor market constraints. The ability to find workers in this economy is difficult, and it's not likely to get better in the near term. So you'll see in our outlook, we are not anticipating a recession. We're anticipating continued economic growth, but it's slow. It's well below trend rates of growth. This is real, it's adjusted for inflation. So you can see the rate at which we expect increases is just barely above that inflationary level over the remainder of 2023 and heading into 2024. Recessionary risk exists. I don't mean to minimize it, but I don't think if you look at economic indicators that economists study, that you see a high chance for a recession right away. Instead, I'd characterize the economy as fragile and susceptible to a number of outside shocks. There are lots of areas where the economy is strong right now. You'll see those here in a moment. And until that strength totally dissipates, the idea that demand is going to collapse and that businesses are going to choose to produce less is a little bit hard to fathom from my perspective. Let's get into the employment markets first. And I think the font size on the slide is a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to tell you what it says, and you'll need to trust me if you can't see it that well. What I'm showing you here is a sectoral breakdown of year-on-year gains or losses in jobs over the 12 months ending in February 2023. And before I dive into exactly what these data show, I want to talk about some data deficiencies that we have. The way that the state measures labor market data is from a survey of employers. That survey is indexed to the third quarter, so we start at a period in September, and then we make adjustments over the course of the year as we get new survey results by surveying those employers. I met with economists from the Department of Labor yesterday, and they briefed me on something that I wanted to pass along to you, which is because of some system changes that were happening in Q3, they think that that sample is undercounting the total population of workers in the economy. So we expect in the future that job numbers for late 2022 and through 2023 are likely to be revised up. I think that this is a little bit more dire than the actual economic circumstances, and frankly, it's not that dire. So what you see at the top of the chart is sectors that are gaining the most jobs. And as you might have experienced here in a resort community, accommodation and food services, leisure and hospitality are the areas where most jobs are being added. I think that's a result of multiple factors. One, we know that these are the sectors that were hit hardest during COVID. And we're still seeing some rebound from there, although we're now back above pre-recessionary levels of employment in those industries. The other is that we still have high level of household savings and the ability to consume, particularly among folks who are disproportionately likely to spend money in resort communities like Aspen. And so that's, again, where I'm talking about overheating. We have more demand in the economy than the economy is able to meet. The consequence of that are rising prices. At the bottom of this chart, you'll see sectors where jobs have actually been lost over the last year. And I think they share a couple of attributes. The sector that's lost the most jobs is finance and insurance. As you can imagine, these are lending firms, firms that are interested in putting more capital into the economy. As interest rates have risen, the cost of capital has become more expensive, and there's less appetite to borrow right now because of high interest rates. Correlated with that are the types of firms that make fixed investment into the economy: construction, transportation, and utilities, firms that rely on accessing that capital in order to produce economic output. Because the cost of borrowing has become more expensive, those firms have less space to grow, less space to invest in the economy. This is intentional. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates in order to bring inflation under control and to stop the level of overheating that we'd exhibited in the economy. The consequence of that is that there are job losses in certain industries. This is the sort of difficulty that we've been talking about for the last 9 months. The Fed needs to balance its dual mandate of fighting inflation while also maintaining a healthy labor market. To this point, the labor market remains very strong, and that fighting inflation has started to bring inflation into check. You'll see that in the next few slides. I'm sure that I don't need to tell you all that workers are in short supply. At the US level, we're at the lowest level of unemployment since I think the early 1950s, nationally. In Colorado, we're not quite, I can't say something quite as flashy about our unemployment rate, but it's even lower than the US unemployment rate. So that 2.9% rate is well below most periods in the history. It's not quite as low as it was right before the pandemic recession, but 2.9% is still a very low unemployment rate. For the last few years, we've talked about labor supply and demand mismatches, the idea that workers who want to find jobs in the economy don't have the skills that employers are looking for in the economy. For the most part, that's been resolved. Most workers have found work. I think that that's mostly because employers are desperate enough to hire people that they're changing the qualifications that they're willing to accept in employees in order to ensure that positions are filled. And so that's where we're at right now. But I think that in the economic press that I've read and in sort of the sentiment that I've gathered in talking to groups like yours is that this is some kind of short-term problem, that really what happened is COVID rocked the labor force and we should expect some normalization going forward. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that I think this is the new normal. I don't think that there's some glut of workers that's sitting out there waiting to come back into the labor force. I think we've stabilized now, and honestly, I think the biggest change in the economy over the next 10 to 20 years is that the story of the US economy will be one of labor shortages. That's different from what we experienced in the 2010s and in the 2000s, but it's driven in large part by demographic changes and by changes in immigration policy. I'll talk about those here on the next couple of slides. I'm just going to turn my phone back on so I can make sure I'm not going over time here. So what's happening in the labor force? The first metric that economists often look at is this employment to population ratio. Really simple math. We're taking the number of people who are employed in the economy and dividing that by the number of people who live in either the United States or Colorado, depending on which series you're looking at here. And what you'll see is there's a pretty significant change in the trend. In Colorado, we're below pre-pandemic and well below pre-Great Recession levels of employment to population ratio. That's true in the United States as well. So this supports the hypothesis that the pandemic pushed workers out of the economy. Those people have, for whatever reason, left, and they're not there and they're not working anymore. But I think it's a little different from that. What if you just look at age groups? Well, first of all, you lose the Colorado series because of the way that the data are reported. But I think that it's fair to say that Colorado likely parallels the US in this respect. If you just take what economists somewhat condescendingly call prime age workforce population, you look at 25 to 54-year-olds, you'll see that employment to population ratios are above where they were before the pandemic, and they're actually above where they were before the Great Recession as well. We're at the highest level of employment to population ratio across the US economy since 2001. 81% of people between 25 and 54 are working right now. So this isn't the case where we've seen some massive fall off in the economy. I've read so many things. I've read it's long COVID. I've read it's men who only want to play video games. I've read lots of different explanations for why this has fallen apart. I think that there's a simpler explanation. Before the pandemic, back in the 2010s, I did an analysis looking at the baby boom generation, birth years, expected retirement dates, and estimated that around 2021, 2022, 2023 would be the peak years of retirements of baby boomers from the labor force. I think COVID pulled a lot of those retirements forward in the sense that many people lost their jobs or chose to stop working in response to the pandemic restrictions, and then just chose not to come back into the labor force population. So that's departures from the labor force among older workers. We're replacing those workers, as we always do, with the generation that's coming into the labor force. That generation is Generation Z. These are the children mostly of Generation X, the famous baby bust that came after the baby boom. Gen Z is a smaller generation. We're replacing what had for many decades been the largest generation ever in the American workforce with a small generation. And that just means that we're shifting more workers out of the economy than we're bringing in. On top of that, we've reduced levels of immigration into the country. They're normalizing now, but over the course of the Trump administration and then in response to COVID restrictions, we admitted fewer immigrants into the United States, both legally and illegally, than we had previously. The result of that, too, is constraints on the labor force. The demographic changes aren't going to go away. What we're likely to see is an aging population in the United States over, like I said, the next 10 to 20 years, where the share of the population that is in the working age becomes smaller over time. The immigration issue is, like I said, stabilizing. I think immigration flows into the United States are about where they were pre-COVID now, though the number of aggregate immigrants that are in the US economy remains subdued. Shown a different way, this shows you changes in labor force by age from February 2020 to now, February 2020, the last month before the pandemic really wreaked havoc on the US economy. And you'll see 25 to 54-year-olds, 16 to 19-year-olds, 20 to 24-year-olds are all up relative to where they were before the pandemic. The one group that's down is the 55-plus population. So moving on from employment for a moment, personal income is the thing that my office pays closest attention to. Like we said before my presentation, like during Sarah's introduction, my job is to forecast income and sales tax revenue that the state government has available for the budget. We pay very close attention to how much households are bringing home. As always in Colorado, and Colorado actually has this more true attribute than the US economy writ large, wages and salary incomes are the most important contributor to household incomes in the state. And they're just barely keeping pace with inflation, right? In 2022, you needed your personal income to rise by more than 8% in order to keep pace with rising costs. Whether or not that happened to you depends on a lot of factors like what industry you were employed in and what other investments you had. If you're a business, how your business performed, what sector it's in. And so for those reasons, we've seen a lot of shifts throughout the economy. I think broadly it's the case that inflationary pressures are more pressuring for folks for whom spending is a greater portion of their income, right? Just in general, if you have an 8% increase in costs and you're only saving 5% per month, that's going to create more pressure on your household budget than if you have an 8% increase in costs and you spend 80% of your income. Put another way, savings rates are down, but they're not down similarly across the entire economy. You'll see there was that huge savings glut during COVID when nobody had the ability to spend money on things that they wanted to actually do. Those savings have built up a lot of this aggregate demand that's led to the overheating that we've seen in the economy for the last couple of years. Because of rising costs, savings rates are down, though they've started to rebound a little bit. And that brings me to a discussion of inflation. So in 2022, every one of these presentations was inflation, inflation, inflation. I wouldn't have told you about the labor market because I wouldn't have had time to do anything other than tell you about what was happening with the prices. What we've seen now is that inflation is down, though it's still very high by historical standards. So this just means prices are now rising year on year at a rate of about 5% as opposed to about the 8% rate that they were rising at in 2022. But what I think is really interesting here is what's driving the costs. Because last year, this was all about commodity prices. This was about the war in Ukraine, constraints on supply of oil and natural gas that resulted in higher input costs for just about everything throughout the economy, which had trickle-down effects everywhere. Now, what's driving costs is overwhelmingly the shelter component of inflation, which is tied to rent. And so this is an environment where landlords, others who are purveyors of rental property, are choosing to increase rents in order to cover their rising costs elsewhere in the economy, and resulting in higher shelter pressure for renters. The way that the Bureau of Labor Statistics handles this for homeowners who are paying a mortgage is essentially saying, here's the amount of money you are losing by choosing not to rent your home because the value that you could make on the rental market is going up by so much. That's a more persistent component of inflation. I think that raising interest rates is a solution to a lot of commodity prices. It's more difficult for the Fed to fight this part of inflation. And you can see as that housing component has become larger, the degree of decline in the inflation rate has become smaller. I think that we're likely to see that over the course of 2023. And so that's really what we're getting at here. The Fed is looking to fight inflation. It's looking to do so by raising interest rates. So far, that's had a positive effect. The question is, will it continue to have a positive effect? And if it doesn't, will the Fed choose to keep raising rates anyway in an attempt to fight inflation that's pervasive and persistent and not able to be slain by these interest rate increases? Lastly, this morning, I wanted to talk about housing, and I know that you'll have more discussion here in a few minutes. But the situation, I don't need to tell you, is pretty intense. One of the things that my office has to do is we're responsible for forecasting the property tax base, assessed values to which mill levies that are assessed locally are applied. Remember, in Colorado, there is no state property tax, so property taxes aren't state revenue, but they do have an impact on the state budget because of the way that we fund public schools. School districts levy their own property taxes, and then whatever they're responsible for funding schools at that isn't made up through property tax revenue has to be funded by the state. And so that's sort of our nexus with it. You'll see, first of all, before we get into the regional discrepancies here, statewide, we expect assessed values for property taxation to grow by 22.5% from 2022 to 2023. That's far and away the largest increase we've ever had. And that's true, there are large increases everywhere in the state. What's happening here is the way that property taxes work in Colorado is we index the taxable value of property to June 30th of an even numbered year. And so your current property tax values are based on the actual market conditions as of June of 2020. And starting for this property tax year, they'll be based on market conditions as of June of 2022. If you think about the trajectory of the housing market, June of 2020 is pandemic winter. This is a point when no one is transacting households because you can't go anywhere because of the public health mandates. June of 2022 is the peak before we started to actually see a recent decline in home values with interest rates rising. And so that's the gap, right? And then you look at the regional differences. So 2 areas where we expect by far the highest levels of growth. One is Weld County because of conditions in the oil and gas industry. The other is mountain resort communities. And you'll see there Pitkin County, the Aspen School District, Eagle County School District, Vail area, Crested Butte, Steamboat, East Grand County, Winter Park. It's all up, 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 up. And again, that's reflective of conditions in household balance sheets where wealthier households have more savings and are able to apply more pressure to the housing market. That pressure's already been applied, so that's having an impact in your property tax base. I was gladdened to arrive here and see a strategic plan for housing sitting on the table. I know that you'll be discussing that in more detail later, so I'm going to let the experts on your local community speak to that generally. I just want to say Aspen's not alone. This is a statewide issue. It's a nationwide issue, but it's especially true here. So when I talked earlier about labor markets, you have structural constraints on the labor market that are true nationwide. You have housing constraints on the labor market that are true nationwide, but are especially true in mountain resort communities. I think that that's, from my perspective, if I were to put myself in your shoes, what I would be most concerned about in terms of your outlook. The economy is fragile to outside shocks. So We had prepared this presentation for the Joint Budget Committee that I was going to give in conjunction with the March forecast, where I essentially told them recession risk is receding. We didn't expect as high of a risk of recession in March as we did in December and September when we did our previous two forecasts. And then the Silicon Valley Bank collapse happened, and I was forced to sort of rethink that. What I think now is true is that the economy is likely to continue to grow at this slow rate. Our baseline forecast is the most likely case. But there's any number of things that could push us off of this narrow path of growth. And that fragility is likely to persist through 2023 and 2024 unless we do, in fact, enter a recession. Risks remain elevated among rapid monetary policy tightening, a housing market correction, and declining balance sheets. We talked about all of those things this morning. Downside risks include, more persistent inflation, stronger interest rate hikes in response to that would crush economic growth further. Housing market corrections, although that doesn't seem to be happening, that's one change from March. It seems like housing prices are stabilizing nationally as opposed to plunging further. Further geopolitical uncertainty is something I've been concerned about at various points during the last year. Upside risks, if we actually see a sustained drop in prices that motivates the Fed to stop hiking, then we'll likely see some stabilization and faster growth than in our forecast picture. The risk of the near-term recession continues to be elevated, but again, I'd say the more important reality for the economy is the overheating that's happening now and the supply-side constraints on business activity going forward. That's all of the time I have this morning, but I want you all to have my contact information. I am a public servant. I work for the 100 members of the legislature, but I also work for everybody in the state. Please do not hesitate to contact me. I will be happy to answer your questions or point you to somebody on my team who can. Thank you all for your attention this morning. Appreciate you.
Does anyone need to change their blob person? Maybe. Thank you so much, Greg. We are going to check in again, do a little more polling with you, touching on staff and labor workforce. What percentage, so head back to your phone for the polling. Let's see here. What percentage of your staff positions were filled this winter? Love to hear from you on your staffing and hear about your business operations in real time this morning. Great. Moving number, let's take about 10 more seconds. Okay. Looks fairly strong, reflective of what Greg just showed us about that labor shortage. Let's now find out about how optimistic you are about filling your positions this upcoming summer season. All right, a little moving. About 10 more seconds. Get your answers in. Okay. All right, well, I think that, again, reflective of that labor workforce that's available to us right now. So thanks. We appreciate, again, seeing that real time of how your businesses are being affected by the available workforce to our community. Next, we will welcome Carolyn Tucker to the stage. She is the Regional Business Services Coordinator from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Carolyn provides labor market information, business education, and support services to the business communities in Eagle, Garfield, Lake, Pitkin, and Summit counties. Welcome, Carolyn.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Greg, for all that great information. The problem with going second after someone as great as Greg is he stole all of my data. So I'll go really fast. Yes, I am the Regional Business Services Coordinator for CDLE. I work out of the Workforce Center based in Glenwood, but we do a lot of remote services for job seekers, but also my role is to support businesses. I work with Allison a lot, and the chambers up and down the valley, actually throughout the whole region, figuring out how can we help businesses survive, thrive, and come up with some of those pesky solutions to those pesky issues. So, just thought I'd start out with, who are we up here in Pitkin County? So you can see, that's who we are. I always like fun facts at cocktail parties like this. So the cost of living index is something that I think we all know, but in comparison to our brethren in Eagle and Garfield County, you can see cost of living in Pitkin County is 127%, Colorado is 106%, and then the place where we get most of our workforce is somewhere in the middle. Greg also mentioned that the largest sector here was accommodations and food service, typical for a resort area, arts, entertainment, and recreation. So this is who we are. These are the people. This is our workforce. These are our jobs. And here's the unemployment rates over the last, three years or so. Starts in July of 2019. And you can see what kind of Greg mentioned. We were very short on labor back in 2019 before the pandemic. You see the rise in layoffs right about this time of year 3 years ago. You guys, Pitkin County won at 23.3% unemployment right during the pandemic. But you can see, as Greg had mentioned earlier, we're getting back down to those lower unemployment numbers. Pitkin County is 2.4%. The yellow is our seasonal layoffs, which are typical, spring and fall, mud season, and fall season. So we're getting back to normal. This is something that I hope all of you know, and if anyone has been driving into town to try and get to an 8 o'clock meeting, you realize that it takes an hour to go up Valley to get to Buttermilk, and then an hour to go from Buttermilk into town. Pitkin County imports almost over 60% of its workforce from down Valley and other parts. And our labor shed in Eagle, Garfield, and Pitkin County is very fluid. We have people coming through the Glenwood Canyon into Glenwood. We have people coming in from Grand Junction to work in Glenwood. We have people obviously moving up and down 82. So that's your workforce. So it's not just Pitkin County that we need to think about from a workforce perspective. We need to think about it from a regional perspective. Okay, so what's happening with our workforce? This is what my head is like almost every single day, because I don't know. You've heard all of these words. And I think everyone likes to put labels on classic human behavior. If there's lots of jobs available, people are going to jump ship for a better situation. I mean, that's human nature. We had a lot of people talk about nobody wants to work. They're all sitting, collecting unemployment or playing those video games. And this is just historically, we always hit a recession or we always hit some reason, some bump in the road that no one wants to work. And this has gone on since the 1800s. So it's nothing new again. What is new is exactly what Greg was talking about. We are seeing increased retirements. People have stepped away, and they're going to stay stepped away because they found other things to do, or the workforce or the workplace is just so different now that they can retire. Decreased birth rates. Aging population in Colorado. We are not attracting that young ski bum as I got here anymore. There's much more competition across the nation for other places to live that are cheaper and have different types of things to do. The future growth, this is from the demographer's office at the state. There's future growth in Colorado, but it's primarily going to be focused on the Front Range. And again, Colorado is no longer as competitive as before. And the bottom line is, there's just not that many people to choose from. And I'm wearing black because this is depressing, so. Again, State Demographer's Office. This is the Colorado. You can see the different colors and the generations. We actually have the silent generation way to your right. The green is Gen X, the baby boomers that are retiring. So you see we have a declining availability of workforce. And this is for the state of Colorado. Look at Pickens County. And again, your workforce comes from all over the place, but you have quite a drop in your 43 to 50-year-old folk. People are having families, trying to find different places to live to have that family. And then look at your Generation Z. This is your workforce right now, and that's a lot less people, bodies. And then Garfield County, again, where a lot of your workforce comes from. It's a little bit more flat, I guess, not quite as so many dips, but you can see that there's a declining workforce. So this is just a demographic shift that everyone knew was coming. I got to tell you, as Greg mentioned, he did a study years ago. We all knew this was coming, and so we now have to figure out what is it we're going to do. Just I did this for Allison because she's kind of a data wonk. And so you can see that those retirements doubled. But there's an opportunity here, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. So again, a graph about your birth rates dropping. Your job supply, kind of what Greg was talking about, is still in high demand. And your labor force participation, you've got unemployed. This is a graph of unemployed in the red and job openings in the blue, and this is for the Northwestern Rural Resort. So this is a 10-county region. You got about two job openings per unemployed person. And again, these are active job postings that we just pulled, again, for that 10-county region. But look at the top. Job postings for registered nurses. And is anyone from AVH here? You guys, not preaching to the choir on this one, but we have, if you have an illness or you're sick or anything like this, our health care is in dire straits to find people and to offer those same services that we are used to getting. And then on a positive note, a lot of people are trying to start their own businesses. Again, there's a lot of churn in the workforce because people are saying, you know what, I don't like that 9-to-5 thing or 7-to-6 thing. I'm going to start my own business. So we are seeing some new businesses, and we need to support those new businesses, either from what am I trying to say? Either from an entrepreneurial basis, those types of programs. Stresses on the workforce. You guys all know this. Housing prices. We did see a drop in women in the after the pandemic because a lot of those women were the people who stepped away to care for the kids because school was closed or childcare was not available at that time. We're seeing it slowly, women participating in the workforce slowly come back, but our childcare, again, is really tough. Availability and accessibility and cost are putting those additional constraints on the workforce. Transportation, again, if you're going from Parachute to Aspen, that's a long time away from family. It's very costly. Lots of job choices. There's a skills deficit going on. A lot of people want to see an 18-year-old with 20 years experience. Not out there. Inflation, and then this great reckoning. People are deciding, you know what, after the pandemic, my parents are getting older, they live in Iowa, it's cheaper there, they can help with the kids, we're moving. We're moving whatever, we're gonna get a Winnebago and we're gonna go travel the world. So it's a great reckoning of what's really important. So, I'm never one to give you all the depressing stuff without giving you some ideas of how we can fix it. So when we look at people, this was a little earlier, 2022 data from the Pew Research Center, this is the reason why people left their jobs. No surprise, pay. And everyone is escalating their wages to see if they can attract the best people. No opportunities for advancement. That's something we can do something about. If they feel disrespected at work, that's a culture thing. Childcare issues, not enough flexibility, working too many hours, working too few hours. So it runs the gamut. But there's lots of things we can do as business owners to address this. This is something that the state's been working on, is job quality. And it's not, a high-paying corner office job is a good quality job. It's, does the job that you have quality elements to it? That makes any sense. And so at the very bottom, it's survival. And this is from a job seeker or from an employee perspective. Survival. The wage meets my basic needs. But as you move up the triangle here, these are things that actually hook people. Is it a safe working environment? Am I recognized? Is there good leadership and mentoring going on? Remember, people said that they're leaving because there's no opportunities for advancement? As you work up the triangle, your motivators, you can actually affect that when you're developing your recruitment and retention strategies and your training programs. Okay, so let's go with some solutions. And this is where the Workforce Center comes in. This is where I come in. Position your company for success. What's your reputation? Are you a good place to work? Do people know that you're a good place to work? Do your employees say, man, you got to come over here, we got a job opening because it's a killer place? That's what you want to generate from your employee base. Are your wages competitive? And at some point in time, you can only raise your wages to a certain point. I understand that. But is it competitive? And there's other things you can do if you're stuck at wages from a business perspective. Recruitment and retention strategies. One of the things that we're seeing, everyone says, oh, great, man, we just want to grab people as much as possible. We've got to get those good people. Hiring processes are still taking 2 to 4 months to onboard, to get somebody in to consider a job offer. 2 to 4 months. And so what does that do if I'm looking for a job and it's taken 2 months and I haven't heard from a company? There's other options for me. So make sure that your recruiting strategy is an activity. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to post jobs? What's my strategy? And can we reel that candidate in fast? Because someone else is going to poach them. Review your processes and procedures. A lot of times, businesses have processes and procedures they made 20 years ago and say, great, done. Now is the time to say your workforce is changing. Going back to that job quality idea, what type of, do our policies and procedures reflect the workforce of today and those moving forward? Invest in your people. Training, advancement, mentorship, all kinds of things will solidify their loyalty to a business. And with that skills gap, again, as Greg had mentioned, the labor force, the only labor force, is 25 to 54. Well, there's a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds who are ready and willing to work. They don't know anything. Can we take the time to train them and support them in their beginning and launch of their career? And God forbid you go after someone who's 55 or 60 who has great knowledge, great experience, and can mentor your youngsters. So don't discount the fringes of that 25 to 54. There are tremendous resources available. And again, when you look at your policies and procedures, can you accommodate part-time? Those who have retired say, I don't want to do the 8 to 5 thing anymore, but I'll do 8 to 5 on Tuesday, Wednesdays, because my wife's still working, or we're going camping. Can you accommodate that type of stuff? Think about those things, because you don't have enough workforce, and you're going to have to come up with really creative ways to find them. And then invest in job quality. Again, that flex time, hybrid work, predictable scheduling. One quick story. A friend of mine works at a large big box store, and their labor numbers fluctuate with their revenues on a weekly basis. And so she came home and said, I don't have to work next week. Why not? Well, we have to cut back labor because our revenues haven't hit where they need to hit. Here's somebody who is banking on that job, and 1 week without pay puts her in a hole. So that's that consistent scheduling that you know you have money coming in. And then some non-traditional benefits. Pet insurance, a well-being program, caregiver. A lot of people are stuck with child care as well as elder care. Where's the flexibility and what kind of programs can you offer? If you can't offer high pay wages and competitive pay, how about a bonus on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis? That will kind of tamper your wage escalation. However, it's a bonus and it's recognition for your workforce. And don't forget education programs and tuition reimbursement. Ari's here from CMC. CMC has got a tremendous bunch of projects and training opportunities to help with that skills gap. There's a lot of resources out there to train. One thing we are doing at the Workforce Center in the state is working on apprenticeships in the medical field to grow our own, because we can't find them outside. We need to grow our own, and what are programs we can put together to grow our own and strengthen that institution. And that's it for me, because Greg did such a great job. These are some of the services that we have at the Workforce Center. Please give me a call if you need anything. Lots of consultative stuff. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Let's shift our focus to the downtown core. Another poll for you. If you'll head back to your polling platform, and we're just going to make a word cloud together. If you haven't done that before, it's fun. So let's hear from you. What words come to mind when you think of the downtown core? All right, couple more seconds, about 10 more seconds. Let's get those words up there. Thank you so much for participating. All right, varied, but good feedback, right? Good to be in this audience together and just hearing real-time feedback from you all. We appreciate this. And with that, we will introduce Lex. Let's take a look at our commercial real estate, and I'll introduce Lex Tarumianz. He is a licensed Colorado real estate broker affiliated with Aspen, Snowmass, Sotheby's International Realty. He has sold over $750 million of real estate in his 11-year career with Sotheby's. Lex has been involved in several record-breaking sales and has extensive knowledge of the market and land use code. Welcome, Lex.
Good morning. Want to thank Sarah and Debbie and the team at ACRA for the opportunity to come talk to you for just a few minutes about commercial real estate in Aspen. And want to go ahead and get started. Keeping it light, there's been a lot of discussion since the pandemic that Aspen has changed. I think Aspen is always evolving, always changing, and it's always been a pretty extravagant place. This is a photo of a parade going down Cooper Avenue, and there are elephants here. Two elephants there back in, I think, the 1800s. So there's always been a lot going on here. So I'm going to cover retail, the retail sector in the core. I'm going to touch on the office market, some hotel construction, the under construction sites that are maybe not so under construction and have been dormant for a period of time, and then talk just a little bit about the future and some of our issues and maybe how we can address them. So retail leasing, we just had that poll, and I think expensive was the top word that came to mind when you think of the downtown core. And I'm not sure that there's much we can do about that at this point. We have a very supply-constrained market downtown. And as far as retail leasing goes, there are only 2 prime commercial spaces that are available in the MLS right now for lease. One of them is this space on the Hyman Avenue Mall. This is listed for $275 a square foot. When you add the expenses on top of that, this rent here is roughly $425,000, maybe a little bit more per year. So we're only going to see so many businesses that can go into a space like this. There's one other small space at the corner of Cooper and Hunter Street that is available. And then there are a few that are off-market that are up for lease as well, or their leases in negotiation. So just to talk a little further on lease rates, our average lease rates in the core now, we're seeing a range of $200 to $300 depending on the location of the space. Is it on a corner? What's the size of the space? The other thing Greg talked about was property tax, and each tenant that's in the commercial core is paying triple net expenses, which include property taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance. When I started leasing property in the downtown core in 2011, we were leasing some spaces on the Cooper Avenue Mall for $50 a foot. The triple net expenses that are added to that $200, $300 of base rent now are up to $40 to $60 a square foot. So we've seen a lot of inflation in lease rates over the course of the last 10 years, and especially the last 5. Off-season shuffle, there's more to it than this, but this is some of what's happening. You saw in the paper last week that Maula's Crepe Shop is going to Starbucks. Fusalp is going to open their new space on the Hyman Mall. Hermes is coming to the Benton building next to Clark's Oyster Bar. Wild Fig's moving to Gray Lady. Stranahan's Whiskey is going on the Park at the Pie Shop space. St. Ambrose is opening their first location. Their second will be at the Main Street Bakery, from what I understand. And then Elliott Yeary Gallery's moving over next to Juice, and I understand there's a pizza concept coming to Hops and a Thai restaurant coming over next to White House Tavern. The office market. We've heard about trends today about commuting. And I think the overarching theme in the office market now is the pandemic. We saw a big rush of COVID refugees, second homeowners coming to Aspen. They were moving in here permanently or temporarily, and they needed to get out of the house. They were looking to buy office space. They were looking to lease office space. And that has driven the rates up to $50 to $100 a square foot on office space. This is the back of the what was the U.S. Bank commercial building, and is now a real estate office up front, and U.S. Bank is now working to lease or sublease this back space. This is offered at $100 a foot. There's vacancy now in the office market, and what we're really seeing is the trend is that employers are starting to move down valley to accommodate their staff, with most of the workforce coming from Carbondale, Glenwood, in that general vicinity. A location in Basalt, such as what the ski company has, is more advantageous for people attracting and retaining talent. Just this month, Design Workshop is moving off of out of their space at 120 East Main Street and moving down to Basalt to the new River Park complex. Moving on to the hospitality sector, the trend, like a lot of what we're seeing in downtown core, is that everything is moving to the upscale, and we're losing that economy lodge bed base on the lower end. Currently, the Hotel Aspen and Molly Gibson are both offline. That's creating supply issues and opportunity for hoteliers to increase their rates. So we're seeing all-time records as far as average daily rate in most of the lodging property in Aspen. Those hotel rooms are going to come back on. We're going to see another 100-plus rooms of luxury supply in the coming years when the Amangiri Hotel and the hotel at the Crystal Palace, the RH Hotel, completed. And I want to talk a little bit about what this means as far as our overall, the economic diversity of our visitor base. And I understand we had a real rush during the pandemic with VRBO, Airbnb, felt like town was overrun, people, crowds en masse walking through town and such. But the new STR ordinance has created a perimeter around town and has eliminated the opportunity for short-term rentals and competition with our hotels. And this line that's been drawn down Original Street and then over on the west side down Aspen Street, I think this is of concern, and I think should be of concern to the community, because I have a photo here of the Silver Glow condominiums over on Waters Avenue. And this is a condominium complex that has been rented on a short-term basis. The units have been rented there, short-term basis, through its history. It is now outside of the core STR zone. And so a new family that was to buy, if they were to buy in this condominium complex and want to offset their costs by renting this short term, are no longer able to do this unless they get into a lottery system. So this is going to create more pressure on rate, move rates upward in our hotels, and leave these properties here underutilized, I truly believe, in the long term. So I understand that we have policy that, there are things that the STR policy can control or hopefully manipulate, but I think there are a lot of properties here that serve a purpose in our community that are not going to be able to operate as needed moving forward. Under construction, we love to talk about construction and noise, and we love to talk about projects that are lying dormant as well. And right now, there are several projects in downtown Aspen that have been sitting dormant for a long time. I think that these projects, from my understanding, some permits have been received, they're under construction, some permits are on the way out, and construction's going to continue on these projects. I think we have to, considering the logic, we've heard about the high interest rates now today, and the fact that in this financial sector, we're losing jobs because people can't get loans out the door. If you look at the lending environment for construction and development projects now, commercial real estate loans for construction running in the 8 to 9% range, so it makes no sense for anything to sit dormant any longer. So these projects are going to be, I would assume they are going to be completed fairly rapidly from here. And I think on a positive note that once those projects are complete and once the Lift 1 corridor is complete as well, based on the formula retail ordinance that was enacted in 2018, I believe that we're going to have a pretty quiet downtown thereafter. There's just not a lot of property that can be turned over and reconstructed on economics that would make any sense for a developer. So I think that's something positive that we can look forward to. So a new way of thinking. The downtown core is expensive, there's no doubt about it, and I think it's going to stay that way. Whether good or bad, there's too much money out there in the world that is concentrated on Aspen to change that in any meaningful way for us to change that. So I think we need to look at what are things we can do as a community to create a more diverse economy. And I look at different areas of town. I spent a fair amount of time looking at the GIS map in advance of this. And, you know, one idea, maybe a master plan of the area from 225 North Mill Street to Clark's, the post office, 465 and 557 North Mill Street, and even extending down to the Consolidated Sanitation District's property. If you look at that area of land, I think it's very underutilized and could be a second economic hub, commercial hub in our community, in a mixed use with multiple mixed use developments. I think there's real opportunity there. I look at the Pitkin County Jail. I think we have probably the only county jail that you're only you're a few blocks from a Nobu restaurant. That's probably the only place in the United States that's the case. There are spaces like the Recycle Center, the Armory, the old museum site. I think our community and our government and the private sector really need to work together. How can we utilize these locations in and around the downtown core to diversify our retail, restaurant, co-working, all those experiences and opportunity. You know, there are a lot of opportunities there if we work together to try and find some solutions. But I think we're going to need to think differently, because keeping luxury brands out of the core, it's fruitless to try and do that at this point. I think that's all I have. I am going to be preparing a more detailed report to go along with these slides. If you would like a copy of it, you can email me at lex.tarumianz@sir.com. And thanks for being here.
All right, that off-season shuffle, everyone wanted to know, right? And I will do my best to get a business after hours at Stranahan's Whiskey in the future. I'm excited. Let's do a couple more polls and checking in on housing, kind of connecting now to staffing and housing. We would love to hear, does your business currently own housing that is utilized for employees? A couple more seconds, get your answers in, please. All right, interesting, almost 60%. Interesting feedback. And then another question, how likely are you to purchase housing in the next 5 years for employee use? It's a great opportunity for our realtors in the room. Great. Close that out. Thank you so much. Really interesting to see how you all are adjusting business practices and operations to accommodate the changing workforce. We all know affordable housing is directly linked to the business environment by providing homes for our workforce. To give us an update on housing developments and the Lift 1 corridor, we welcome to the stage Aspen's Assistant City Manager, Diane Foster. Before moving to Aspen, Diane was the city manager for Park City. Diane sits on the boards of the Rotary Club of Aspen and the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I am slightly shorter than you. Lex, I think you have the right audience here. 4 of the 5 council members are here, so you're probably preaching to the choir. Just to start us off, how many folks here went to the regional housing conference that was held here? A number of you. So I'll start off with a couple numbers that you've seen before. This was from a study that was done by the group that preceded the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. that West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is that new group of folks who represent local governments. I'm Aspen's rep on the board, and we are working regionally throughout the valley and the Colorado River Valley to look at, we formed as a nonprofit because they can access funds that local governments can't necessarily access. Anyway, they did this in 2017, showing 3,000 shortfall between Snowmass and Aspen. That was planned or forecasted to go up to 3,400 unit shortfall, and that was before the pandemic. So obviously things have changed. Just to quote a number that Matthew Gillen, who's the executive director of APSHA, gave, in 2022, APSHA had 18 homes that were category 3 and 4, and those are people who make between $130,000 and roughly $200,000 for a two-person household. There were 18 of those homes that went on up for bid, and there were 500 bids submitted for those 18 homes. Just to give you an idea of demand, APSHA no longer keeps a wait list for rentals because it's just too crazy and the demand is so high. There we go. Looking at job growth, the fastest growing categories, as you can see here, are categories 2 and 3, and that's between 50 and 120% of area median income. And just as a reminder, in 2022, area median income for a one-person household was $75,000 for Pitkin County. You've seen some of this data, so it won't surprise you, wages are not keeping pace with housing prices. And while there used to be, APSHA, I came from Park City, Utah. In a similar area of Pitkin County, we had 400 affordable housing units. Aspen, Pitkin County, 3,200. The envy of every resort town in the West. Started in the 70s, got started early and done right. It used to be you bought in Aspen and in Pitkin County into APSHA, and then you could buy down Valley once your income started to increase. That is no longer possible post-COVID, as you can see here. To address this need, so we'll go from the bad news to the good news. City of Aspen is currently working on, has in the development process 356 new units that will actually be built. Last year, as you can see on your table, and thanks for the plug, Eric, you can see on your table there's an affordable housing strategic plan. It actually is not a traditional strategic plan because it includes 14 action items of things that the City Council wants us to work on as staff. That commits us to 500 new units by 2026. Those also include development neutral strategies, such as APSHA's got a new right sizing program, and they're working on, City Council just gave permission for staff to use 5 of the new Burlingame units as right-sizing units, as a pilot, to see if we can get folks to downsize. We know we have about 500 empty bedrooms, and so can we get people into Burlingame by having them downsize and create some new bedrooms. Lumberyard is currently before Planning and Zoning Commission, and we are looking for P&Z members. They couldn't get a quorum last night, so we couldn't get this done, but we're pretty close on it. And you can see when those are scheduled to go online. So it's expensive. National bedroom averages about $120,000. We're only at about, we had about a 46% increase between Burlingame 2 and 3. We're looking at about $900,000 per bedroom. City Finance Director Pete Strecker's in the room, and he is going to figure out how to finance this. We were actually, Pete and I were texting at some ungodly hour last night, and the city's got a AAA bond rating, which in my experience you only get if you are a property tax funded special district. So that is a truly impressive number. So Burlingame, going online this year. As you've all heard, we've got some construction defects that we're working out before they go online. Those will go to sale this year, 79 units in a staggered lottery process. I mentioned the right-sizing units, and there will be an urban growth boundary preference So folks who work within the urban growth boundary will have a preference. It's much like Basalt's program and Snowmass's program. The rest of the APSHA portfolio, though, is available to those who work and live, or who work within Picken County. So I should first say that there is no way that the city can do this alone, right? You've seen all the numbers. And so it is amazing, though, that we have folks in the room from AVH, that SKICO's in the game, that the school district is in the game, that RAFT is in the game. And as we just saw, many employers are getting housing for their employees. That is the only way we are all going to have employees 10 or 20 years from now. And it was great to see, I saw Greg's here this morning, Picken County, it was reported on Aspen Public Radio this morning that staff will be, Picken County Board of County Commissioners has told their staff they want to consider a funding source for affordable housing. And this morning, APR reported the staff recommendation will be a property tax, but that'll be a discussion that these folks will be having, and as well as Picken County and APSHA and City of Aspen. The two of those, City of Aspen and Picken County, split the costs associated with all of APSHA's activities. They're fully funded from there. So this lumberyard is going to be built in 3 phases. You can see the buildings 1, 2, and 3 from left to right. There are, it will require that the real estate transfer tax gets renewed before December 31 to fund this. And there are some, please reach out if you're interested in more information about that one. I would be remiss if I didn't, where we're talking about the things that employees need. They need housing. Childcare creates workers. Childcare is an economic issue. The Kids First is funded by sales tax. Thanks to the community for that. They have a number of programs in addition to working on teacher improvement and quality of childcare work. They also do have a subsidy for families who can't afford childcare, and that a lot of us in this room now qualify for these. Additionally, there's a lot of work that's happening on financially supporting the teachers. So this program went into effect in January. The city developed this program. The counties also implemented it for those outside of the city, child care workers outside the city. And as you can see, we gave away nearly $50,000 just in the first quarter in checks to early childhood educators. They also have incentives for if they do continue their education, they get financial benefit for that. There's also a hiring bonus that the city provides to new child care workers. Last but by no means least, Lift One Corridor project. You all know a lot more about the history of this one than I do. The relevant things for today are that Gorsuch House, they recorded all the information they needed to get their vested rights for 5 years. They were recorded in March of 2022. Lift One Lodge has just come in. They recorded all their documents on March 15th, and they've just got their building permit. So the clock is starting to tick on those folks, and those rights are vested for 5 years. Last but by no means least, I did want to bring this up. This is Newcastle Creek Bridge, and the reason I wanted to bring it up to this audience is because this is an economic issue. A lot of folks have told me and told other folks at the city that city staff is pushing this. Well, at the direction of council, we are pushing the conversation to happen. And the reason we're pushing the conversation to happen is that this bridge is 62 years old. It was built to last 75 years. However, it is the busiest 2-lane road in the state of Colorado, and it was never built to handle the kind of traffic it has today. If we get weight restrictions on that bridge, or which would be the first thing that would happen if the bridge starts to fail, that will have a huge economic impact on all of us, including that there's no way a bus would be able to go across that bridge in a weight restriction. There are so many barriers. I live in Missouri Heights now. I lived 2 years in Aspen and loved it. I live in Missouri Heights. There are so many barriers to employees coming to Aspen anymore. There are wonderful jobs now in Willits, Carbondale, and Glenwood. They are wage competitive. And so making it possible, transportation is an economic issue, as you all know. And so I would just encourage you, if you're not involved in this conversation, jump in the game. We'll be going back to our city council on May 15th to answer some questions that they had and get direction from city council on next steps. My name's Diane Foster. I'm here on behalf of Sarah Ott today, and thank you for the opportunity.
Hi there, thanks for staying with us this morning. I'm Allison Bektesh, I'm the Public Affairs Manager with ACRA. In full sincerity, a morning full of graphs is my favorite thing, so I hope it's been as stimulating for you as well. I'm just here to briefly tell you about some of the public affairs work that ACRA does on your behalf, and then we'll bring the presenters back up for some questions. So as a chamber member, your needs and interests are represented in policy discussions throughout our community. We do that through a public affairs committee that represents sectors and experiences throughout our workforce. This year, our committee's focus areas are housing, transportation, and workforce support. Along with the work of the Public Affairs Committee and our Board of Directors, ACRA's public affairs work also consists of outreach and events and advocacy and education. So over the last year, that has included drafting policy statements on major issues, speaking on Aspen City Council meetings, submitting public comment on changes to demolition and short-term rental ordinances, hosting focus groups and a feedback forum on the Galena and Cooper Living Lab, and creating resource pages on our websites, including a new one on the entrance to Aspen. We do our work based on a policy survey. So you all have QR codes on your table. It's not the little piece of paper, it's the big piece of paper with the QR code on it. We send this to all of our members and our workforce contacts. That survey is live now. Please take it if you have not. Someone who takes it will win an associate pass to the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. I hope it's someone in this room. So if you need a little more incentive, you could be that lucky winner. Along with informing our public positions and our policy work, this data also helps us to give you more information. It basically serves as a comp study. So when you, as an employer, are recruiting or retaining staff, you can come to us and see what else people in our community are doing. So I'm giving you a quick example of what some of that data looks like or how it might help you. So for instance, flexible work hours and health insurance are the most common benefits offered by our member businesses. If you are having a hard time with recruitment and you're not offering these items, that could be something to consider. Additionally, if you'd like to set yourself apart, some items lower on this list might assist in filling those open positions. In our survey, we ask our respondents to self-select if they represent owners and management or if they're members of the workforce. This allows us to see where there might be some room for better understanding between the two groups. One example, you can see that employees have the sense that their place of work is short-staffed to a much higher degree than our business owners do. So if you're hearing some of those culture things from our presenters earlier, that's something to look into. As we've heard today, the workforce landscape is changing. That old adage that you either have 3 houses or 3 jobs in Aspen is no longer the case. What we're finding in the results from 2023 is that most people have 1 full-time job with benefits and they're in their desired field. Furthermore, for both the employee and the owner demographics, a majority of them here in our community do find room for growth. So if you have 1 job in your field and you think you can move up, you probably aren't looking for those other jobs. Okay, so please take time to take the survey. Along with the policy stances that your input gives the Public Affairs Committee so we can represent you, we also look into some of these biggest issues. So one person told me this is the dumbest question I could have asked, and that is, should new affordable housing be built? We also have questions about transportation this year.
We're trying to figure out our membership's commuting habits, vehicular and parking needs, and their priorities when it comes to traffic. I'm making this quick because it's not finished yet, and I don't want you to memorize these answers. So, once again, here's the link to the survey. Please get involved in our policy work so that we can represent you. We will now bring the panelists back up to the stage. We do have a mic in the audience. Please wait till the microphone gets to you if you have a question for any of our panelists, and we will do a quick Q&A. Liz Watson in green has the microphone. If you have a question for anybody from what you've heard today, please raise your hand, and we will bring you a microphone. How are our blobs doing?
Thank you. Greg Postman, Pitkin County Commissioner. A question for Greg. Thank you for being here. Over here, if you want to look, see where I'm looking. Yeah. Okay, there I am. Thank you for being here. You may have heard that the mountain communities are very concerned about Senate Bill 1255, which changes land use code zoning, will affect a lot of 50 years of land use and zoning policy in our communities in the mountains. I think there's a huge economic impact. Has that come before you yet? Have you even had a chance to look at that? And do you have any comment for us?
Absolutely. So Senate Bill 213, this is a bill that was in committee yesterday, as I understand it. It passed out of its first committee of reference with significant amendments. I read the initial version of the bill. My understanding of the bill now is that it's been pretty much entirely rewritten. And so I don't want to comment on what the rewritten version does as of yesterday. I'll say, just as a little bit of an insider view to the legislative process, that bill has a long way to go. It's out of one committee in its House of Introduction. It still needs to go through another committee in that initial House, then through floor work in the Senate, and then go through the entire process again in the House of Representatives. I don't know the politics behind it like intricately, but I do know that it's not a done deal yet in terms of what the current version of the bill looks like. Whatever they do end up producing is something that we'll consider for our future forecasts. And yes, I do believe that it will be significant in terms of its impacts, both positive and negative throughout the state if it does become law.
We have a question in the front row here. Thanks for your patience while the microphone gets to you. As members of ACRA, updates about things like Senate Bill 213 are in your e-news bi-weekly. If you'd like to join the Public Affairs Committee and have even more insight, we are always accepting new members as well.
This is for Carolyn. I just had a question on population, year-round. I know you had up there, but do you know currently kind of summer population, winter population in the valley, or Aspen specifically?
The data that I pulled was from the U.S. Census Bureau, and of the 3 counties, and this includes Vail, Eagle County, the Vail side, not just the sliver of Roaring Fork. It's about 155,000 in the 3-county region. What we're looking at really carefully, and it's really hard to parse out, is are we seeing any people leaving the valley? Are we seeing a drop in our population? And are we seeing a drop in our workforce for people heading off to places that might be a little bit more competitive or something like that? And it's a little challenging because we see an influx of those retirees who don't have to work and they're not participating in the workforce, yet they're keeping the population numbers up. So it's a little, we have to dig a little deeper on that. But again, basically, it's about 150,000 in the 3-county region.
Can you speak to Aspen specifically, or we don't have that data?
The population from the Census Bureau is about 17,000 here in Pitkin County.
Year-round.
Year-round, right. And then, the flux in and out from a seasonal perspective, that's probably more from an employer perspective. How many does SkiCo pick in for their seasonal summer and winter? What we are seeing is, again, seasonal picks up from a construction basis as well as maintenance. And so a lot of the down valley businesses that are located down valley come up and do that work, like landscaping, construction, things like that.
Thank you.
Last call for questions. This event was recorded, and we will be providing the recording and the slides. So if you're as dazed as the eyes look right now, you get to review this all again. It can be bedtime reading. I'm going to bring Debbie back up. Thank you for being here.
Hi, it's Debbie Braun again with Aspen Affairs. Wow, what a program. We learned so much from the state level, a regional level, a local level, and I hope you enjoyed the program. If you're interested in learning more about the Aspen Chamber Resort Association, give us a call at 925-1940. Before I leave, I just want to make sure to thank our sponsors today, Atlantic Aviation, the Aspen Meadows, and all of our speakers. I really enjoyed the content. I think it's going to help all of us create this environment for Aspen to thrive. Make it a great day, everyone, and thanks for watching Aspen Affairs.